What's the difference between emotional immaturity and narcissism? Everyone tries to find ways to skirt using that dirty word, narcissism. To call people difficult, toxic, volatile, confusing, clueless, unfiltered, self-centered, egotistical. It's unfortunate because if someone is indeed narcissistic, the word narcissism captures the whole thing, all the jagged edges. It's not just someone who is selfish. It's not just someone who is unfiltered. But what's the deal with this whole emotional immaturity thing? Does calling it emotional immaturity make this whole narcissism conversation more palatable? Does it make it feel less accusey? Personally, I don't think getting a handle on someone's personality is accusatory. I think it's healthy and it's frankly strategic and puts us in a better position to have realistic expectations for the relationship. And in fact, if you are really empathic, if you know someone's personality, you may even be in a better position to protect them. Listen, I have agreeable friends who I know will go out of their way for me, but I never want to take advantage of them. It's just, I just don't. That wouldn't feel good to me. So I'm very careful to not lean on them too much, lest I burn them out. Does that make sense? So we can have an empathic reaction to someone else's personality. And if you have someone antagonistic in your life, well, then you know that this is not going to be a fully emotionally safe or buttoned up or well put together person, and you're going to need to tread more lightly. And if you can do that early, it means you can actually hold some space for some very difficult people in your life. But if you let them in too deep, then you have a real psychological mess on your hands. So, what's the difference between emotional immaturity and narcissism? I guess maybe the question is there a difference? And more importantly, do we sometimes use this sort of lighter term of emotional immaturity that seems almost like a forgivable quirk to shame and blame and confuse folks who are in these relationships and continue to give folks who behave in an unempathic and in an invalidating ways, to give them a pass. So narcissism, I've said this a million times, I'll now say it 1,000,001, it's on this continuum, on this spectrum, from mild to really severe. At the really severe end, we have all the malignant narcissism, psychopathy adjacent, dark tetrad, coercive, scary shit. At the mild end, that tends to be the more superficial, unaware, selfish, emotionally immature stuff. And I think in most cases, when we use this term emotionally immature, we may be capturing some of the milder narcissistic patterns, as well as patterns that may not be fully narcissism. They don't have all the stuff, right? Emotional immaturity is lots of things. And unlike narcissism, it's not always as well defined. It's used conversationally. Emotional immaturity takes in territory like adolescent selfishness, infantile tantrums, high school triangulation and gossip. People who are emotionally immature have a lack of patience with situations that would require patience, such as raising children. It is impulsivity. It's not considering consequences. It's emotional dysregulation, and it's a lack of self-awareness. And as a rule, here is what emotional immaturity is not. It is not cruelly manipulative. It is not necessarily heavy gaslighting, unless the gaslighting is a sort of pathetic maneuver to wiggle out of a situation. Things like, I never said that. Stop being a jerk. I didn't do that, but I bet you did. I mean, this isn't high end, like the kind of gaslighting that makes you think I've lost it. If the emotionally immature person is exploitative, it's mildly so, like being really nice to you because they want your concert tickets or to swim in your swimming pool. But it doesn't feel like emotional extortion level taking advantage of you. Emotionally immature people do not tend to be coercive. Emotionally immature people can betray you, but it doesn't have the sinister feel of what we see happening in more antagonistic relationships. The emotionally immature person is getting a blowjob at a bachelor party. The more moderate to severe narcissistic person is having a more elaborate and unapologetic affair, or has more than one and is denying it and calling you crazy when you point out changes in their behavior. So both are obviously betrayal, but they definitely feel different. The betrayal of the emotionally immature person feels more impulsive, childish, crime of passion, YOLO kind of nonsense. So some of you may be thinking, well, if it's just that, I guess, yeah, it hurts, it doesn't feel good, but it's not the next level stuff of the more moderate and more severe narcissism. So maybe it's not that big a deal. Well, some of that depends on the nature of the relationship you are in with them. If you have an emotionally immature parent, you end up having to be more friend than child. You are parentified and have to take on roles that you are not ready for, but that you also know that if you don't, then it will be a mess. And by the age of 8, you might have already found yourself trying to pull together a lunchbox for your 5-year-old sibling, or fill out your own school forms, or figure out how to get dinner started. Children of emotionally immature parents may endure various forms of emotional neglect. The emotionally immature parent will do things like compare their situation to the child. Saying the emotionally immature parent might say things like, you think you have it hard? Let me tell you how hard my day was. And sometimes the emotionally immature parent will expect the child to hang out with them and be their sidekick and their best friend, when the child would rather be with their peers, and then the child is left feeling guilty and not wanting to be their immature parent's friend. As you get older, it may even get into the uncomfortable realm of your emotionally immature parent flirting with your friends or asking them inappropriate questions. The emotionally immature parent may put themselves on the same playing field as you and your peers, perhaps even dressing in a way that, or dressing in a manner that doesn't feel age appropriate, and making you feel as though your parent is trying to sort of exist as your equal. And again, this whole idea of like, we're best friends. Children of emotionally immature parents may feel abandoned insofar as their parent wasn't a parent. And in some cases, emotionally immature parents can actually be fun, right? They'll throw themselves with reckless abandon into childlike activities, but then they do not have the capacity to do things like setting limits and boundaries and the kind of caregiving a child needs. And all of this can foster a unique trauma bond, with the child perhaps actually kind of really enjoying this emotionally immature, fun parent, but feeling let down at other times, or even resentful and abandoned and not having a parent who's a grown-up, and then feeling guilty because their parent is actually more fun than the other parents, or even their other parent, who have all these bedtime rules and stuff like that, or even your other parent who has bedtime rules and stuff like that. So you better believe the emotionally immature parent can take a toll, but may not leave the child with that sense of subjugation, that the child cannot ever be their true self, that to express a need is a violation of the social contract of the family, or ultimately with that sense of feeling not enough. Children of emotionally immature parents may not get their needs met, at least not by the emotionally immature parent, but they may not be as consistently shamed for asking for the needs to be met. And sometimes then the child often just has to figure them out themselves. The impact of the emotionally immature parent will be really magnified if the child does not have another adult present, another parent who is an adult and can do adult things like caregive and set limits and boundaries, or other caregivers or other family members such as caring grandparents to support the child. But all of this is in contrast to the child of the narcissistic parent, who is often kept in the confusing prison of rules, expectations, neglect, anger, fear, competitiveness, abandonment, and vigilance. It's different. It feels different. The other place this whole emotional immaturity thing makes an impact, though maybe not as profound as the narcissistic personality, obviously, is in intimate relationships. Listen, these relationships may be really fun in the beginning with an emotionally immature person, but once it starts coming down to real adulting, filing taxes, paying the bills, planning for the future, any kind of adulting, and most importantly, raising kids, it's not so easy. Emotionally immature partners may play video games for endless hours and spend wastefully and stay late at happy hour and still want to run their social lives like they're 21 without a care in the world. And the partner of an emotionally immature person may find themselves having to take the sole role of grown-up, killjoy, and disciplinarian. You become the parent, and that is not fun. Resentment can grow, and you feel like you're in a relationship with Peter Pan. That loses its luster when you're trying to live real life. On top of that, emotionally immature people can be inappropriate, can engage in betrayal that feels more careless, engage in careless behavior, and be irresponsible. And the trauma bond here can look like they're sweet and they're so much fun. They bring out the little kid in me, but I am exhausted. And they treat me like I'm a buzzkill. And so you're saying to them, no, we can't just smoke weed and play video games this afternoon. Like, we have to get this paperwork done. There are few things less sexy than having to be your partner's parent and scolder. And if you're raising kids with them, you have to be the grown-up parent, which often puts you in this tough, triangulated space of you not being the fun parent, of you having to always make the rules happen, and then the other parent gets to be the fun parent and often isn't having to do all the other heavy lifting of parenting. And you may say like, okay, this isn't the narcissistic relationships I'm reading about, but I'm still really exhausted. But here's what's interesting. This emotionally immature partner is not likely to be engaging in higher level manipulation. You may not be left confused by this relationship. Instead, you may feel frustrated, annoyed, and angry. Your own self-blame may be the eye roll of, I can't believe I put up with this BS. The emotionally immature partner may not have that capacity to wait until you're behind closed doors to hurl their hurtful words and be charming in front of other people the way the narcissistic people are. The emotionally immature person just be their emotionally immature selves everywhere. And many other people may just be charmed by that childish behavior. But the emotionally stunted person's behavior doesn't have that calculated feel, like waiting until we get in the car to yell at you. The emotionally immature partner will not gaslight you with the same level of sophistication. The emotionally immature partner may be dysregulated and throw tantrums when they don't get their way. But it may not be as much of the shaming or the overwhelming rage or the silent treatment as much as sort of the sullen grumpiness of an aggrieved adolescent or the insistent whining of a child. With an emotionally immature partner, you may not feel like you're upside down or have lost your mind or isolated, and other people around you may actually get it. But as I said, they may also be sort of charmed by the emotionally immature person's way of being, especially if it is not destroying their day-to-day. It feels different, folks. I've actually walked many, many people through these emotionally immature relationships. And I personally actually have been through both kinds of relationships. The emotionally immature relationships are exhausting and they're annoying. But they're also sometimes sweet. While the narcissistic relationships are a bit more soul-crushing, crazy-making, shaming, and isolating. And we feel panicky at the thought of losing them until we get it. Interestingly, we do not actually feel as psychologically unsafe in an emotionally immature relationship. Instead, we may just sort of feel pissed off and aggravated and put out and tired of having to be the only adult in the room, or always having to clean up the messes. And sort of the trauma and safety responses we have may not be as pronounced. Now, can some emotionally immature people be narcissistic? Of course. In fact, a substantial proportion of them may very well be. Emotional immaturity in and of itself is a hallmark of all types and all levels of narcissism. But at the same time, there are a lot of emotionally immature people who actually probably don't quite level up to narcissism. They get very close, and it may be narcissism light. Their lack of empathy feels more like emotional stuntedness. And unlike narcissistic people who can turn on the empathy for and be regulated in front of people that they value more than you, that they value you, the emotionally immature person is like a kid who kind of treats everyone uniformly. So that shifting of the narcissistic relationship that can leave us feeling uniquely devalued isn't a thing in the emotionally immature relationship. Interestingly, we can make some emotionally immature relationships work. Friendships that we are not, for example, overly reliant on. Some workplace relationships that they can still get the job done. Even some family relationships with people, again, that we're not reliant on. Some emotionally immature friendships can actually be a little bit fun. A great night out, great at a party, fun on a beach day. But you may not want to loan them money or start a business with them or count on them to talk you through a real problem or be there for you in any consistent way. But it is important that we are aware of these distinctions, because I see a lot of people who are in genuinely full throttle narcissistic relationships be shut down by this emotional immaturity conversation with the sort of framing that, oh, your mom, she's just emotionally immature. Oh, your husband, he's just emotionally immature. And it's not just that. That then means that the person in the relationship may then start to feel like they're being too judgmental or making too big a deal out of the problematic patterns in the relationship. And it's just a little immaturity, and that they need to stop reacting to it. They're just being immature. But it's not that. It's important you be clear on the difference. And many of you have probably been through both kinds of relationships and may feel the difference. If you are in a full-on, full-blown narcissistic relationship, it is different. And that's not to say that an adult relationship with an emotionally immature person or a child relationship with an emotionally immature adult is a walk in the park. It's not. Like I said, being raised by an emotionally immature parent can actually be quite unhealthy. But it is not the pronounced emotional harm, and in some cases, relational trauma, that happens to people who experience narcissistic relationships. Be clear on the difference. And if you do go to the amusement park, maybe take that emotionally immature friend with you, but be prepared to only go on the rides that they want. Thanks again.